You know, when you think about cybersecurity, there are these silent heroes working 24/7 in the background. There are digital watchdogs, always on the lookout for anyone trying to sneak onto our networks. So today, we're gonna pull back the curtain and take a look inside one of these critical pieces of tech, the intrusion detection system. And that is a fantastic question, right? Because before we can really get into the technology that stops them, we've got to understand who or what we're even looking for. What makes someone want to break into a secure system in the first place? Well, it turns out there's no single answer. All right, so let's start right there. Let's profile the threat, because in security, knowing your enemy is always step one. What's just wild is the sheer range of reasons people do this. You've got your classic cybercriminals, right? They're just in it for the cash, stealing data, ransomware, you name it. Then you have hacktivists who are driven by a cause. They're trying to make a political point. On a whole other level are the state-sponsored groups, these advanced persistent threats, or APTs, who are basically digital spies for governments. And yeah, sometimes it's just someone looking for a technical challenge or some bragging rights. But here's the thing, even with all those different motives, most attackers follow a surprisingly similar playbook. First up, they do their homework, gathering info on the target. Then they find a way in, maybe through a software bug or just a weak password. Once they're in, the goal is to get more power, something called privilege escalation. From there, they can finally do what they came to do, steal the data, break the system, whatever. But they're not done. They'll try to leave a backdoor open so they can get in later. And the very last step, you guessed it, covering their tracks so no one knows they were ever there. Okay, so now that we know the attacker's playbook, how in the world do we stop them? Well, this brings us to the hero of our story, the intrusion detection system, or IDS. This is the tech built specifically to spot those steps in real time. Now, the key thing to get here is that an IDS isn't a brick wall. It's not a locked door. Think of it more like a super sophisticated motion detector. Its main job isn't to stop an attack, but to see it happening and to sound the alarm, to give you a warning that someone's trying to get in who shouldn't be there. So how does this whole thing actually tick? Well, when you boil it all down, it's really just three main parts. First, you've got the sensors. These are the eyes and ears, constantly collecting data from network traffic and log files. All that data gets sent to the analyzers. That's the brain of the whole operation, deciding if anything looks fishy. And finally, you have the user interface, which is just the screen where a person, a security analyst, sees all the alerts and decides what to do. Okay, this is where things get really interesting. How does that brain, the analyzer, actually make the call? How does it decide if what it's seeing is a real attack or just normal chatter? Well, it basically has two very different ways of thinking. And this slide just lays it out perfectly. There are basically two schools of thought here. On one side, you've got anomaly detection. This approach spends its time learning what normal looks like on your network. Then it flags anything that's weird. It's like seeing someone walking down the street in a full ski mask in the middle of July. You don't know exactly what they're up to, but you know for sure that something is not right. Then you've got signature detection. This is way more straightforward. It's like a security guard with a book of wanted posters, checking every single face against a list of known bad guys. The real superpower of anomaly detection is its ability to catch something brand new. That's what we call a zero-day attack, an attack no one has ever seen before. Because it knows what's normal, it can spot something malicious, even if it's never been cataloged. Now, signature detection, that's your workhorse. It's super fast, very efficient, and it's fantastic for catching all the usual suspects, the known attacks. But, and this is a big but, if an attacker comes up with a totally new trick, it's completely blind. It can only find threats that are already in its database. All right, so we get how these things think, but the next big question is, where do you actually put them? Where do you station these digital watchdogs to make them the most effective? Because placement is everything. And we've got another great analogy here to break it down. Think of a host-based IDS, or HIDS, like a security guard you post inside your most important building, say the server room. It lives on that one machine and watches every single thing that happens on it. A network-based IDS, or NIDS, is totally different. It's like the security cameras blanketing the entire property line. It watches all the traffic flowing in and out of the network, looking for threats coming from the outside. Okay, so far we've been talking about playing defense, right? Watching and waiting. But what if you could go on the offense a little? What if you could set a really clever trap?
Well, that is the absolutely brilliant idea behind what's called a honeypot. It's a total decoy, a fake server, a fake database designed to look super juicy and valuable to an attacker. The best part? Since no legitimate user should ever be touching it, you know that any activity is hostile. It's a trap that not only distracts the attacker from your real systems, but also lets you watch their every move and learn their secrets.
But here's the reality check. It doesn't matter what method you use. Anomaly, signature, honeypots, the whole shebang. Every single one of these systems runs into the exact same fundamental, inescapable challenge.
And that challenge is this constant, tricky balancing act. How do you make this system sensitive enough to catch the real bad guys without it constantly crying wolf over nothing? And trying to find that balance creates two huge risks. On one hand, you have false positives. These are the false alarms. The system screams, intruder, but it's really just a normal user doing something slightly unusual. If this happens too much, your security team gets buried in noise, they get alert fatigue, and they start ignoring everything. But on the other hand, and this is way scarier, you have false negatives. This is when a real attack slips by completely undetected. The system stays silent, and you're left with a dangerous false sense of security. So why is this so incredibly hard? It all comes down to a tricky statistical idea called the base rate fallacy. Just think about it. The amount of normal, everyday traffic on a network is gigantic. We're talking millions and millions of harmless actions. The number of actual attacks, it's tiny in comparison. So because real intrusions are so rare, even a system that's, say, 99.9% accurate can still generate a ton of false alarms unless it is almost perfect. But even with all these challenges, an IDS has a powerful effect that goes beyond just catching attacks in the act. It's all about deterrence. Simply having an effective watchdog in place can prevent an attack from ever happening. Just like a burglar might skip a house with a visible alarm system, a hacker might just move on to an easier target if they know a network is being watched closely. And that really brings us full circle. In this constant cat and mouse game of cybersecurity, where the threats are always changing, the real goal is to answer this question. How do we build a digital watchdog that isn't just vigilant, but one that's also wise, able to learn, adapt, and truly tell the difference between a real threat and a harmless shadow?